Elderborn is a first-person melee combat game developed by Hyperstrange. In Elderborn, you play as a selected champion from your tribe to explore a city that rose from the ashes of your fallen ancestors, and you do so by slashing your way through hordes of enemies in a fast-paced, fairly lethal combat system. When I first saw this game, I was actually pretty eager to try it. It compared itself to Dark Souls in the character progression and seemed very no frills. However, after seeing it was in early access, I thought I'd take a quick look at other people's opinions on it, and to put it kindly, they seemed a little bit mixed.
No, it's not. It's not good.
Wait a second, I'd recognise that name anywhere. What the heck is Two Lanes doing here? This guy used to make, like, comedic battle right content.
So I step on the orb like its name is Flick, and then I'm trying to beat the heck out of Sirius when what?
Well, either way, Battlerite isn't pulling the same numbers it used to, and you've already got an audience, you might as well use it for something, right? But either way, when he reviewed the game, it was in early access, and the game's certainly come a long way since then. In fact, if you look in his video, you can see the devs responding, so we might as well just get straight into the review. The majority of your time spent during this game is going to boil down to fighting a small handful of enemies, while the story serves as set dressing confined to a few cutscenes and lore tablets found around the world. But honestly, this isn't really an issue, and I think the majority of players are here for the gameplay, not the story anyway. The combat overall is fairly well fleshed out in terms of options. You can dodge, parry, block, strike and kick, which serves as an interrupt, but your parry and block are tied to the weapon you're using, so you kind of have to pick one. The only other tool you have is a big old health needle that uses the Dark Souls system. That means throughout the game you'll find fountains, and respawning at fountains replenishes your health juice, but also respawns all the enemies. Now, for the most part, I think the combat system is pretty good. I improved over the course of the game, so it's definitely learnable and functions consistently enough that you can get better at it, but I do indeed have my reservations. One of them is the game's balance, but I'll talk about this in the spoiler section in case anyone wants to try the game and work that out for themselves. But the next big issue I have is what I'm going to call instruction queuing. Basically, in Elderborn, if you try and panic parry an attack, but accidentally click twice in the heat of the moment, you will end up parrying twice. This is because as the animation for the first parry goes off, the game is still listening out for commands, so to speak. Now, you can argue this adds to the game's skill. You need to learn not to panic click. However, in my opinion, all it does is make the game feel sluggish and like it's always catching up with your previous inputs. Kind of like when your parents pick up social media for the first time, only to post cringy minion memes from a decade ago. Now, I can already imagine some of you in the comments saying, well, Dark Souls did it and Dark Souls is a great game. But firstly, I can't remember if Dark Souls even did do this, and secondly, if I can't remember, it clearly didn't impact the combat that much. I think this is down to the difference in pace. For the most part, Elderborn is a faster paced game with more enemies, and therefore it's a lot more reactive, so punishing the player for panic clicking multiple times doesn't really feel like a good fit. But to go back to the good points, I think the game's combat has a nice flow to it when you're in the groove. For example, kicking someone off a ledge only to 180 parry a sword hit and decapitate the perpetrator, then to charge into a group of the next enemies does feel pretty goddamn good. Also, the game does have a couple of unique ideas. For example, I adore the visual representation of health. All the enemies are pretty colourful and vibrant throughout the game, so as you deal damage, the colours on them fade. Also, considering this game is only about 3 to 5 hours long depending on difficulty, saying I'm glad the enemy variety is pretty high. And speaking of difficulty, bless the devs for giving the intended difficulty the same name as the game. Before I head into the spoiler section of this review, I do want to quickly point out that while the enemy variety is high, the majority of the game does feel repetitive. This is because the game is literally just combat and very basic puzzle solving. I'll go into more depth as to why, but again, to do so I need to get into spoilers, so if you don't want to be spoiled, please skip to the time on the screen. So now we are here, I'm going to talk in depth on my issues with the game. To begin, let's address the balance concerns I was talking about earlier. One thing you'll notice if you play Elderborn is that you get showered with weapons constantly, so naturally finding something to fit your playstyle is a pretty fun aspect of the game, or at least it would have been if the balance wasn't so comedically out of whack. The biggest reason being the game's pace. The heaviest weapons in the game slow down your movement speed, which for me at least meant they were totally useless in a combat setting. Some of them have non-combat uses, but these are pretty limited, and I don't really understand why they exist, such as a hammer which allows you to break through certain loose cobble walls, but I see no reason why this couldn't have just been another locked door, because Lord knows this game is littered with them. But putting the heavy weapons aside, I still can't can't think of a good reason why anyone would choose anything other than the Katars or Spear. The Katars have insanely high DPS and have the strongest parry in the game as far as I could tell. To counter this, the parry timing is the least forgiving in the game, but assuming you've been playing for over half an hour, you're probably used to the pace of the game anyway, and once you're in the zone, it's still quite easy to pull parries with the Katars off. The only real downside to them is the range. You have to be really close to the enemies to hit them, which is where the Spear comes in. Its range is far greater than the Katars, and it still has solid DPS, plus the parry has a very generous timing window. So with weapons out the way, I'm going to talk a little bit about the level design and difficulty. Firstly, the level design. Elderborn is effectively split into 3 levels or acts: the tomb, the city and the finale. To begin with, the tomb ramps up pretty well and teaches the player a lot of things, such as there will be traps, exploration will be rewarded with extra souls, you can trivialise large sections by using the infinity kick. Oh sorry, I was trying to stay objective. But seriously, it's a mostly enjoyable section in which the level design more or less contributes to a good experience, and it's topped off with a pretty average boss fight. The next section, the city, is where the game could have been so much better. The city is reminiscent of slums, meaning that the area has multiple levels, and due to your character's mobility you can climb and run through pretty smoothly, but on the other hand, the fact that you can take different routes makes it feel like the devs just jam-packed every iota of space with enemies, and simply put, it makes the whole thing just feel like a bit of a clusterfuck. You simultaneously have to parkour to reach certain enemies that make sections hell if you don't kill them first, and won't want to engage with anything just because of the sheer number of enemies. I personally feel like they should have focused more on the parkour and just let sections be easier once you know the routes, because here is the real kicker. Despite the number of enemies, once you get to grips with the combat, the game really isn't all that hard. Almost every enemy can be parried very effectively, so the quantity just becomes a massive slog. Before talking about the finale, I want to talk about the game's difficulty curve. As I've already said, after a certain point you know how to fight the basic enemies, so the game becomes quite easy for the most part and lacks any real curve. In the city specifically, there are 3 towers you need to interact with. The top of each tower contains a gladiator-style combat section with a group of enemies in a locked-off arena. These sections are complete hell, and the cities beneath them are absolute piss by comparison. So you end up with this bizarre combination of white noise followed by an insane brick wall. After beating all the towers and solving a basic puzzle, you get access to Ornstein and Amzarak and Anane, and my god, this boss was yet another insane brick wall. I don't think this style of boss is well suited to this game whatsoever, to be honest. The slow enemy is too fast to keep up with the game's pace, which means you have 2 bosses that have really powerful gap closing abilities, both hit pretty hard and are relatively quick. The quick one you can at least parry, but fighting Fake Smile is just straight bullshit. You have to bait out an attack, poke him and then backpedal as fast as possible. But because the dash doesn't give you iframes and he combos attack sets pretty quickly into each other, it makes for a frustrating experience and not in a particularly fun way. But to get back to the finale, after going through all that with the bosses, you get what might be the lamest reward I can possibly think of. You complete 3 or 4 wave-based levels, get a weapon that one-shots everything, slowly walk towards something while yeeting enemies off the screen, use the weapon as a key to open some ancient chamber, only to have the game not give you a final boss and then abruptly end. So before wrapping up, I just want to quickfire a bunch of smaller positive and negative points. Nearly every ranged enemy in the game is dumb as shit, they all seem way too strong to me. I think it's cool that the enemies are in different factions and they fight each other, but it's very bizarre when you see them all chilling near each other, but when you poke one, suddenly all hell breaks loose. I think that the general aesthetic of the game is quite good. At first I was scared about the whole metal as fuck thing, because it's easy for it to come off way too wacky or way too serious, but with the cartoony visuals and over the top story, I thought it worked. I personally don't understand why they added leveling. This feels like a game that didn't need it, and the leveling is boring as hell. You have 3 stats with a couple upgrade abilities that aren't that impactful. And finally, I was going to do a what did it all mean section like normal, but after reading the lore tablets, there just wasn't that much to get. This game just existed for combat and aesthetic pleasure, which is fine, but it does mean doing that segment seems a bit pointless. So in conclusion, I think Elderborn has a good core combat system, and I hope Hyperstrange can create something a little more engaging next time. Ultimately, it's a shame that the level design is the real Achilles heel, but I see no reason that this couldn't be fixed or improved upon. I would still recommend this to people who are hardcore into the first person melee genre thing. I think they will enjoy it more than I did, but I'm feeling about a 4 out of 10. Elderborn is available on PC for £11.39 on Steam and the Humble store, but if you enjoyed the video, please consider buying the game using my Humble partner link. It doesn't increase the price, but I do get a little kickback from each purchase. Plus, they usually give you a Steam link, so you should be able to get it in your Steam library anyway. If you're interested in more Soulsborne content, please make sure to check out my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/DevonReviews. I stream on Tuesdays, Thursdays and Sundays, plus on Fridays I do indie games. Make sure to leave a like or comment if you've enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.